800 years before Jesus, the prophet Isaiah walked the hard-packed roads of Jerusalem. The book that bore his name, the book of Isaiah, is 66 chapters long, and that writing belongs not just to the prophet, but to the school of people that gathered around him. And that group created an anthology of writings and sayings that took place before, during, and after the people of God were taken from Jerusalem into exile in Babylon. In the second part of that book, the message of the prophet to the people of God is that they ought to leave Babylon, cross the desert, and enter the promised land. They were to take a journey through a parched and perilous land toward a destination that God had chosen. And within that section further are 3 songs. Sometimes they're called the servant songs, or sometimes they're called the songs belonging to the suffering servant. And they're probably self-referential to the prophet Isaiah, but also the early church understood those songs to refer to Jesus, the suffering servant whose own wounds had healed them. So part of that song says, "The Lord God helps me, therefore I have not been disgraced. Therefore I have set my face like flint, and I know that I shall not be put to shame. Therefore I have set my face like flint." Flint is hard. It forms as nodes in sedimentary rock like chalk and limestone, and it's valuable precisely because of its hardness. It's been used for a few million years to create tools, and even today, if you go backcountry camping, a staple of that is if you take a straight piece of steel and rub it against flint, you'll create sparks to start your fire. Flint is valuable for survival because it does not crack or weaken when it comes up against something hard. Today we meet Jesus along a road, but he's not just out for an amble. Rather, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. Or as the prophet might have said, he set his face like flint. The hardness and the angularity of that focus disturbs some people who do not receive him when he passes through town. Others are drawn to that singularity of purpose, and they pledge naively to follow him wherever he goes. But in both cases, we learn that it is no easy thing to learn to follow Jesus Christ. There is nothing more common than believing we can follow Jesus as one task that we are multitasking among many. The purity of focus that is required for the task and the singularity of the one that we're following are so easily lost. Maybe especially in church, where we're surrounded by so many other things to look and worry about. And like barnacles on the hull of some great ship, if you're on that journey of following Jesus Christ, those things just start to kind of become accretions along the way. And the only way to get them off is to scrape them with a hard edge. And we do that through things like confession or Sabbath or prayer. In quick succession, the gospel gives us 3 instances of those accretions that cling to those of us that are learning to follow Jesus. 3 people who encountered Jesus on this road who had just one more well-intentioned thing to do before they got around to the following part. The first person approaches Jesus directly. I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus replies, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Some creatures find their home underground, some up above, but some, Jesus said, are destined to walk along that hard-packed road, and they have no settled or ordained place to call home. It's as if Jesus is saying to us, I am more important than your home and the stability that it represents. To a second person on that road, Jesus utters the command, follow me. To which our stranger gives a compelling reply, I absolutely will, I just need to bury my father first. And that was the correct answer. Societally speaking, that's what everyone expected. But Jesus is not impressed. What's dead is dead. Your job is to go proclaim the kingdom. And it's as if he's saying to us, I am more important than your family and its demands. A third and final person approaches Jesus. I will follow you, just let me go say goodbye and wrap a few things up first. To which Jesus replies, once you put your hand to the plow, you can't let go. It's as if he's saying to us, I am more important than your history and its limitations, the things that are holding you back in the place that you were. And in all these exchanges, Jesus shows us that he, like that prophet before him, was calling people to leave exile, cross the desert, and make their way home, except the home that he was inviting people to was not geographical. It was not spatial or temporal, but it was spiritual. That wherever it is that people follow Jesus, in that place they could find home, because Jesus himself was home and would become their home. Jesus' face is set like flint. It is hard, and it's singular in its focus on the will of God. And to rub up against that rock is to risk ignition, to invite sparks that could catch parts of our life on fire, to risk having all that is straw in our life burned up. At the same time, to draw close to Jesus is to sometimes see a flame that might just light our way in a place that feels like darkness to us. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the kind of focus that Jesus is talking about in this passage. You know, we say as part of our mission, vision, values that we live in an age of distractions and self-promotion, and we absolutely do. And that we try here to pursue a deeper rhythm. You cannot have a deeper rhythm without the focus. That word focus comes from the Latin word for hearth or fireplace. It was the center of a home. As a person and a priest, I have expertise in very few things, only a small handful of areas. Focus might be one of them. Focus is something I've thought about and prayed about and been mentored about and read about and studied about and practiced and prayed for many years. It was author and Anglican priest Arthur Boers who first tuned me into the idea of focal practices. Those habits and practices that require our complete focus and concentration, and in the doing of them, we find some sort of deeper joy and satisfaction. For you, that might look like hiking or woodworking or reading or gardening or running or painting or sailing or something else entirely. For me, my spiritual director years ago helped me identify 3 things as places where I encounter God: music, my shed, and the garden. And identifying these focal practices changed them for me from being mere hobbies that I would do on the side and think about as something kind of light and fleeting. And instead, the spiritual director invited me to think about those things as places where I encounter God. That those were not things to leave to the side, to leave to when it was late at night and there was time or energy for nothing else, but as something to embrace and focus on as a place or a practice where God showed up. In the spirit of a summer reading list, I thought I'd end my message by sharing a few authors whose words and philosophies on the practice of focus have helped me tremendously, personally and professionally. The first I already mentioned, Arthur Boers. And in a very difficult part of my life and ministry years ago, it was his book that helped me chart a way out of that and gave me something to focus on that could be redemptive. The book is called Living into Focus: Choosing What Matters in an Age of Distractions. A second author is Greg McKeown, and he has 2 wonderful books, Essentialism and Effortless. They're both on the New York Times bestseller. When I opened the second one to read it, the inscription has a quote from the Gospel of Matthew: "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." And my suspicion after reading the first book that he was Christian, I think, bore out in reading the second. And the subtitle of Essentialism, his book, is The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. Listen to this excerpt. The word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. It was singular. It meant the very first or prior thing. It stayed singular for the next 500 years. Only in the 1900s did we pluralize the term and start talking about priorities. Illogically, we reasoned that by changing the word, we could bend reality. A third author is Cal Newport. He's got a number of incredible books, but the one that got my attention, I was looking for one book, and it was the book next to it on the shelf in the bookstore, and the book is called Deep Work. Fantastic book. If you're looking for something to drink while reading one of these books, I would simply reference the motto for Toronto Brewery's steam whistle: do one thing really, really well, which is a kind of focal practice of its own. Danish theologian and philosopher Søren Kierkegaard famously wrote, "Purity of heart is to will one thing. One thing." It's precisely this one thing that Jesus invites us to focus our gaze on today. When you come to church, you will not find the next big thing. And when we're at our best, you will not even find one more thing. But we will learn together what is the one thing, or as Jesus said elsewhere, the one thing needful: God. If you're anything like me, when you take a pause to go away, you might have 5 books lined up to read on vacation and 30 things you're going to do on your holiday. And instead, we might follow Jesus' gaze to discover the one thing needful. to follow his glance, which is set like flint on a place in the distance that he is heading toward and a path from which he will not stray. What one thing is God calling you to focus on this summer? One thing. Set your gaze like flint and then do it.